I'm here right now with Katy Faust. And Katy, I appreciate you coming out tonight. Your organization, Them Before Us, tell me about it.
So the idea is them, the children, before us, the adults.
Okay.
It is the only organization totally devoted to defending children's rights in the family.
Okay.
So most people are pretty familiar with children's right to life.
Right.
They have other rights too. And the secondary right after the right to be alive, is their right to be known and loved by their mother and father. And when we defend those rights, we actually solve pretty much every social issue that we're facing today, because fatherlessness especially is at the heart of all of our social ills, from homelessness to high incarceration rates and poverty and teen pregnancy and behavioral disorders, addiction, suicide, everything. When you drill down to the bottom of any of those issues, you're going to find fatherlessness, because fathers and mothers do something for their kids that no other government entity, no other adult really is able to do for them. So we also believe that when you're looking through the lens of children's rights, you also answer our most pressing questions about marriage and family. So we take this children's rights lens and we use it to look at issues like surrogacy and divorce and the definition of marriage and reproductive technologies and adoption. And we prioritize the rights of the child and then expect all of the adults to conform to those rights.
You had a very interesting presentation tonight. When you were talking about surrogacy, you were talking about adoption. The one point that you said about adoption always entails initial loss.
Yeah.
It's not that adoption is bad, but you have to still recognize the fact that the best for the child would still be to be with his or her natural mother and father. Yeah. And I think you can speak about that from experience, because you have an adopted child, don't you?
Right, yep. Adoption begins with loss, and we need to be honest about that. Right, and then adoption is a just society's response to a child in need, right? So what we do is we recognize that a child has lost their parents, either through tragedy or relinquishment or due to extreme circumstances of abuse, and we say, okay, this child deserves to have a family, but then we don't gloss over that that came at a major cost to the child.
Right.
So I'm an adoptive mom. I used to work at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. Adoption is about adults doing hard things so that children's needs are protected, but I don't pretend that I can compensate for everything that my son has lost.
Got it. And how old is your son right now?
He's 10.
Okay. And how old was he when you adopted him?
We got him right before he was 2.
Okay. So, and I've heard other people talk about this. Dr. Jennifer Roback-Morse, for example, she has both a natural child and an adopted child that were pretty close together age-wise, I believe, or at least when they came into being, but when they came into the family. But that was one of the things that she talked about. You could notice the difference between a child who was natural with another natural mother and father, and the one who, as much as they love and accept each other and their family, there was that loss that was there, and how it impacts that child throughout life oftentimes.
Right. And there's a couple issues at play with people who are adopted, and there's a variety of experiences. But generally, adopted kids, even though they are placed with couples that tend to have more stable marriages, they tend to be more highly educated parents, and they tend to be wealthier parents. Those adopted kids still struggle disproportionately, whether it's in school or with other risk factors through their life, because we're actually asking a child to do something that no child should ever have to do. We're asking them to detach from their biological parents and reattach to biological strangers.
Yeah.
And that means that, number one, they suffer a wound, a primal wound, if they lose their parent at birth or whenever that parent is taken from them or lost from them. And number two, they often struggle with what we call genealogical bewilderment, which is the idea of like, where do I fit? Where do I belong? I don't see myself in anybody in the family. And they can't answer those who am I identity questions the same way the rest of us can, using kinship and extended family. They have to answer that on their own. And that's difficult. So there are challenges to adopted kids, and you can be pro-adoption and recognize that.
Now, you mentioned something about your blog that when you talk about the issue of adoption, that I thought was very fascinating, and I'm not sure that I completely got it. I'd love you to expound on it. there are a lot of adoptive children, when you talk about adoption, that they react very strongly.
Yes.
Please elaborate on that just a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we obsessively focus on the rights of the child, right? We say children have a right to life, children have a right to their mother and father. Adults, whether you're gay or straight, single or married, I don't care. You conform to the rights of the child. Don't make a child sacrifice for you. So one of the things that we oppose is surrogacy in every case, because every time, whether it's altruistic, whether it's commercial, whether the children are going to be handed over to their genetic parents or not, at the moment of birth, the child loses the only parent that they know, and that is the surrogate, the birth mother, the woman that they have known for 9.5 months, whose body they long for, whose milk they crave, whose voice they know. And this is the woman, this is the person that they want. We put infants on the chest of their mother when they're born,
Right.
not so they can form a bond, but because they have an existing bond.
They have an existing bond.
They have spent 9.5 months bonding with
Yeah.
that woman. When you separate a child from the birth mother, it is tragic. Sometimes it's necessary in extreme cases. But when you do it intentionally, it's an injustice.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Now, circling back to your question about adoption that you started with, I recognize that there are times when adoption is necessary. When the biological parents have failed, when there's been a tragedy, something like that. And so I support adoption as a remedy for that tragedy or that difficult situation. There are some adoptees who feel that they have been so hurt by adoption that they are probably the group that I get the most resistance from in my work. Not the kids of divorce, not the kids with gay parents, not the donor-conceived kids, it's the adoptees. Because for them, they feel like the separation from their birth mother was so traumatic that there was never a case that would justify it.
Yeah, and to go back to that, I remember being at a church up in the Washington area where you're from, in Olympia, and there was a man there that was, he had been completely adopted, but it didn't make any sense to me because he was looking for his mother, looking for his mother, looking for his mother. He's very successful in everything else. And I know that one of the things he said that he wanted to share the gospel with her and, tell her that he loved her or whatever. But I could never quite understand that. But listening to you tonight talk about this, I thought it helped to make some sense. I've not been unsympathetic to the issue, but the way that you expressed it tonight, I thought was very, very good.
Well, the longing to be known and loved by the two people responsible for our existence,
Right.
probably one of the most universal human longings that there is.
Right.
Right? And the reason why marriage as an institution is pretty uniform across the globe, across history, across religion, is because it solves that problem for us, right? Marriage, historically speaking, was simply the tool that almost every religion and culture has used throughout history to incentivize men to commit to the women they're making babies with, so the babies will have their dads, right? So the babies will grow up with both their mother and father, right? So that historically has been the tool that we've used to say the child needs to be connected to both parents,
Yes.
right? And if you look at a child in any of those 5 religions who is missing their father or missing their mother, I guarantee you they're all thinking the same thing. Where is she?
Yeah.
Does she love me? Does she think about me as much as I think about her?
Right.
Who is she?
Right.
Did I get my eyes from her? I bet I get my love of music from her. I mean, this is a primal bond that we've got, the bond with our parents.